I'm building a 2-trailer tiny house, and this is a very special build update. Now, I'm sorry it's taken me so long to get a build update out, but it's just been so wet here, which has made cladding the exterior of this thing pretty challenging. But also, I severely underestimated just how much work it was going to be, particularly all the detail work I had to do in around those swinging walls and the sliding roof. It just took a lot of time. Now, this is a really special build update for 2 reasons. First of all, it marks completion of the exterior of the tiny house. With the exception of my air vents, where I have to get some aluminium powder coated, some mesh bent up to go on the outside, the exterior is done. So now we move on to the interior and we can start making this thing a home. But more importantly, it marks a really significant milestone in this build, because from this point forward, we've actually successfully joined 2 completely independent tiny house trailers into one single seamless tiny house. The best bit about all the crazy weather we've had is it's let me see how this thing's going to perform. And not even the shed has been weatherproof, but this thing has not leaked a drop, which I am so happy about. So we've actually functionally joined the 2 trailers together. The rest is just aesthetic. Now, don't get me wrong, that is not inconsequential. It's going to be a real challenge on the inside to make it look like a single seamless house. But it's now functionally joined together, and the best bit, it looks $1 million, and I'm pretty excited to share with you. So let's go check it out. So before we check out the house, let's have a look at the cladding we're using. So this is Prominence, which is a standing seam cladding by Fielders, who are also a build partner of this build. Now, this is one of their architectural claddings, a part of their Finesse range. So if you're looking to stand out, you should absolutely check that out, and I'll link it down below. Now, the cool thing about this stuff, other than the fact that it looks amazing, like those lines on that house just speak for itself, was how easy it was to install. So this is a nail strip standing seam cladding, which means all you have to do is to set that first panel on the wall, and you've got to get this right because it sets the tone for the rest of the wall. But once it's set, you can then come along, clip your next panel on, give it a tap with a rubber mallet to seat the seam, and then it holds it in place while you go along and screw it off, which just made installation so easy. Now, the other thing I noticed about this, and I don't know if this is an actual feature or not, but when you clip the panels together, you can see it's sort of spring-loaded. What I found was when you then fix down that nail strip, it seems to put the pan under tension, which appeared to really help with oil canning, which can be a real issue with standing seam. So if you're not familiar with oil canning, it's sort of where you get waves or divots through that pan, which is a common byproduct of cold folded steel. I really didn't have much trouble at all, other than around my windows where I'd cut out the seam, and that meant there was nothing supporting the edge of the pan. So it just made installation so much easier. And the best bit, it looks bloody amazing. So let's go check it out on the house. So in the last video, I'd already cladded this end wall and the shower, but I hadn't done the corners yet, and I was going to come back and put capping flashing over that. But I just really didn't like how it came out and how the capping was going to go up and meet the flashing at the top. So I decided to redo it. So the reason I didn't do that in the first place was where this last panel ended up, the seam to the panel here ended up sort of 10 mil past the end of the corner. Anyway, I came up with the idea of getting a larger panel and then folded it up into the corner here and then tucked it in behind the seam of this panel here. So that gives me a nice neat corner that continues out, comes out, and now this shower has nice neat folded corners on it. So to kick off the cladding after the shower, I started on the main trailer. Doing the cladding on this wall was pretty challenging because the cladding only laps in one direction. So technically, this cladding on this trailer here starts all the way down the end there, then continues all the way up this wall, and then all the way down to the other end. So instead, what I did was start at the end of the trailer here and work out how I wanted the end to look. So I've centered my panels on there and then folded up those corner pieces and then used them for references down the side. Now, the front of the trailer was much easier because the cladding is heading in that direction. But on the other side here, it was a bit more challenging. So the problem I've got is the cladding is lapping in this direction here. So what I had to do was to, from this corner, measure back all the way to the start, work out where my first panel goes, and then clad the wall back to meet these corner pieces. Now, sadly, that didn't go to plan, because despite my best efforts measuring, by the time I get to the end here, I need to be out by a bit, and these panels won't lock in properly. So after I'd cladded the wall, I had to pull it all off again, move that first panel a little bit, and then reclad it again. So that was a bit of a pain, but in the end, I met that corner and got it looking nice and neat. So along the front of the trailer, it was much easier. I could start at this corner and then work my panels forward. And then when I got to the door here, I actually had a bit of a challenge. So you'll remember I moved the door like 3 times, which meant like pulling the doors out, rebuilding the wall, moving along. And there was 2 reasons for that. First of all, was to center the doors in these ribs here, which was a lot of work, but I think you'll agree was worth the effort because it looks much nicer. So when I was doing those doors, I hit a problem. Despite moving them 3 times, I was actually, when it came to doing the cladding, I was 5 mils off, which meant the door was offset by 10 mil. Now, that doesn't seem like much, but with those narrow strips that got down either side of the door, it really showed up. So what I found I was able to do, now I don't know if this is an actual tip, so you probably shouldn't listen to me, but because of the shape of this seam, I found you're able to open it up a little bit. So I had to move mine over 5 mil. I was able to stretch out 5 panels, just 1 mil, and make up that distance. Now, I absolutely would not do any more than 1, maximum 2 millimeters, but cool little trick if you're having trouble meeting an opening or a flashing with these seams. But the other reason I moved the door so many times was I was trying to align those doors with the cladding so that when I open my door, that handle doesn't actually strike the seam of my cladding. So check this out. When I open the door, the handle comes just inside the seam of the cladding. Now that took a lot of work. And these things, I know I cop a lot of shit for constantly redoing things, but it's small things like that I think are really important, because otherwise my handle would be striking straight on the edge of that seam of the cladding, and that not only would it just destroy the cladding, but it's going to bugger my handle. So that's why I spent so much time moving those doors, so that works seamlessly. The doors can open all the way back onto the cladding. It looks $1 million. So once I'd worked my way down from the end to the join here, I stopped my last panel before the join. I then used a blank sheet to get the spacing right to start my cladding on the wall, and I could just finish the cladding all the way through to the end. Now, I'm going to come back to how I've done those joins in a moment. So once I'd done the main trail, I moved onto the side trailer, and this thing was a lot of work. So the first thing that I did was I wanted to line up my cladding so that I could have an even flashing on both ends of the trailer. Now that took a bit of work because I had to work out where I start this first panel of cladding so that when I get to the other end there, this last seam ends in the same spot so that I can use a consistent size flashing. And you also notice that this flashing is actually square. So I've managed to somehow, I don't know, cosmic alignment or something, I've actually managed to line up the cladding on all of the 4 walls actually, so I can get this nice, neat square flashing. If you've put flashings on, you'll know that was almost impossible to get on. I tell you what, it was difficult, but I really like that it's a nice, neat corner to the house and isn't too obtrusive and doesn't take away from the elegance of these lines. So the other thing about putting the cladding along here, now this trailer was a real challenge because I had to calculate where all of these seams were going to land. So as you're working with this stuff, you really need to think about the cladding when you're actually designing the house, because if you end up with a seam right on the edge of a window, it becomes a nightmare to try and fit in. So luckily the bathroom window and the composting toilet hatch worked perfectly, but as I clad along the wall and got to the bedroom window, it didn't work. Now if you follow on Instagram, you'll know that the window ended up hard up against this rib, and I think I could have got the flashing in there, but I was unsure. So I could have let this one go, and I contemplated it for a while, and I'm like, nah, I have to change it. So I had to pull all the cladding off of the wall, rip all the battens off, pull apart half of the studs inside, and rebuild that so that I could move this window over a little bit and line it up with the center of the seams of the cladding. Now, that was a lot of work, and luckily this window I could actually move. But I tell you what, I like it much better centered inside these seams. Now the other challenge for the seams is I've done a mansard finish along the top there. So that's where the cladding on the roof comes down and falls over the edge seamlessly into the wall sheets. But to make life difficult, I've done it on both sides of the trailer. So the problem with that is that every rib on this side of the house also needed to be considered on this side of the house. So not only did I need to consider where the seams were going to come down in relation to this window, but more importantly, where they're going to come down in relation to my join. So the way these swinging walls work, I needed to make sure I had enough space so that I could do all of this flashing work for how it receives the sliding wall, the swinging walls, and how the flashing work was going to work up the top there for the sliding roof. Now, luckily, it worked out that I could bring those seams up over the roof, bring them down this side. I had enough room for that swinging wall and the sliding roof up there. It worked with this window, and I was still able to somehow align all of these panels centered across the tiny house so that I could have even flashings at each end of the house. I don't know how that happened, but I'm pretty chuffed that it worked out. So let's come back and have a look at how I've joined these two trailers. So in the last video, we went over how that sliding roof seals up in a lot more detail. But now you can see how that flashing comes down over the top of my cladding and neatly finishes it off. But also how that capping comes along and joins seamlessly into the main trailer and continues along. That's critical to making this look like one seamless house that leads into the side trailer there. So what I did to seal up this end of the sliding wall is I finished my last panel here. I then took my next panel and I folded it around to this inside lap that we built into the frame. Then here on the wall, you can see how the wall steps down. When the wall swings around, it creates an overlap with a step and closes up nice and tight. Now, with all the crazy weather we've seen, wind and rain coming in sideways, I haven't seen so much as a breeze on the inside. So I'm not even sure I'll have to worry about the rubber seal that I was going to put down on the inside between those two lap joints. But we'll see how it goes. So on the side trailer, this was a lot of work to make these swinging walls nest up and make it look seamless. In fact, I don't know how many times I had to redo this and go and order new flashings and come up with new ideas, to the point where I actually got the name Flashing Fill at the hardware store, which without context is kind of a bit awkward, but probably creating some rumours around town. So where the swing walls swing around into this side trailer here, we can see our metal frame and the nylon bushes that take the locking pin. What I've done is created a flashing that comes out, then steps out around the swinging wall. And then it's got a break here that seals up against the cladding. I've done a squash fold on this break so that it doesn't give me a sharp edge, and I'm going to line the inside of this with felt. And that's so that it doesn't rub the cladding on my swinging wall, because these are actually designed to allow the swinging wall to move in and out or to be at different distances. So that felt will stop any rubbing marks. I've then brought a flashing that caps over the end of my wall, comes down around and steps up over the top of my cladding. I've then cut holes, my locking pins, so that they can slide in and out of the flashing. Now as the wall closes, it comes around and nests into that flashing that we have on the wall. And because this joint is covered with a flashing and step, it's completely weatherproof. So here on the inside of the house, you can see how the sliding roof retracts back into the side trailer there, with the mansard finish coming up over the top and meeting that head flashing. And that head flashing there, I've got a silicone seal that comes down and laps over the top of the rib on the back of that sliding roof. So with all the cladding on the walls done, I then moved onto the roof on the side trailer. And this thing was a challenge. So other than the fact that I had to work at height and I was roping off, I was doing a mansard finish on both ends, which was just such a nightmare, because each sheet had to be exactly the right length, because if I was just a few millimeters off, the points to my mansard finish wouldn't line up and it would really show. So I had to get each sheet, measure it individually, cut each end at a different angle, put it on, check that it was all right, pull it off, polyurethane all the joints, and then fix it down. So I'd do a couple sheets, fix them down, and then clean off the excess adhesive and then keep going. And then to add to the difficulty, I was fighting so much rain, and because I was doing fiberglass insulation underneath the cladding, I had to get it all done in one day, because if that got wet, there was no way that was drying out. So here's a little tip for mansard finish that I didn't realize until it was pretty much too late. And that is that when you fold over this pan, you don't fold it square. So to do a mansard finish, you cut the wall sheet down inside of the seams and fold the pan over. Then the top sheet comes down over the top of that and you seal up against it. Now, There's other ways of doing it as well, but that's the way I've done it because I like the look of it. So the trick with this is, because this standing seam has a nail strip, the side with the seam is actually 4mm higher than the side with the nail strip. Now, that's significant because when you've got the roof down on your wall sheet, when this side with the seam is sitting up on a previous sheet, it's 4mm higher. So what you actually need to do is, when you fold this fold, is to fold the side with the seam 4mm higher so that it comes up and meets the bottom of that lap sheet. So once I finished cladding the house, I moved on to trimming out the windows. And the theme of this house, I've made it more complicated than it need to be. I've made these box flashings so that finish up neatly against the edge of the cladding here. What I've done is I've put angle onto the cladding all the way around the window that allows me to slip this capping over it, and then I can pop rivet into the side of it so I don't see any pop rivets on the face. But also it stops the flashing from being able to compress. Now that allows me to put a glazing bead between the edge of the glass and my flashing. And what that does is it finishes off the edge of my glass, it protects the edge of the glass, and also stops weather getting in there. So to complicate things further, instead of just having a flashing that comes out on the bottom of the window and then down over the top of my cladding, what I've done is I've made up these box flashings as well, and then cut them in around each seam of the cladding. Now, the reason I've done that is, on this house, in many places, the bottom of the windows is either at eye height or above, which means you're looking up underneath the window. Now, if I just had a flashing that comes down over the top, I would be able to see up behind the flashing. I'd just see the edge of steel, and you'd see the ends of the cladding, not to mention it's going to get cobwebs and whatnot in there. So by doing this, it was a lot of work, but looks much neater for the windows that I have to look up at. So that's the exterior of the tiny house complete, and I can't tell you how good it is to be at this point, particularly because I've actually joined together 2 tiny house trailers into one. It's such a significant milestone, and I almost can't believe that we're actually here. But the challenge is far from over, because now I've got to pull together an interior, and I've got some really cool ideas, but they are going to be a lot of work. And if I'm honest, I'm not even sure where I'm going to start yet. So buckle up, because from now on, it's going to start getting pretty cool. You guys know the drill. Don't hate, educate. Comment down below if you see something in this video that can be improved, or if you've got any questions about the cladding. In fact, even just let me know what you think of the exterior, because I absolutely love how it's come up. Actually, I think there's like this emoji with 2 hands, so I'll put it in the description. But if you're one of the crazy buggers still watching and you like the exterior of the tiny house, show us that 2 hands. In the meantime, go build cool stuff, and I'll see you guys again soon.